Welcome to the latest edition of A Bit of Light Relief. Thank you for joining us yet again. Is it the lightest of light relief?
A bit of heavy relief. I think I'm breathing in. After Christmas.
Post-Christmas.
Bit of heavy relief. God, we're not going to sit on anyone's toe.
No. As previously stated, we collectively want to help our HR community in bringing a bit of fun in the workplace and discussing HR topics that are relevant of the moment, really, and so that people can understand our points of view and just get some practical, hopeful
Getting the
advice.
conversation going, isn't it?
So who are you then?
Who am I?
Who are you? Who are you?
I'm Jordan Barry. Bayless. I always forget that.
We want that
The viewers are used to that, and I can't even say my own name. I know what that actually says about me as a leader, but I'm beyond it now. I'm beyond it. Who are you?
Just as you are. I am today. I'm going to be Letitia Ramsden because I change my name every time, but depending on how I'm feeling, so I'm Letitia today. Happy with that? Yeah. I'm the CEO of the Curve Group.
And I'm Kelly York. I'm the Chief Operations Officer at the Curve Group.
Yeah. You're the one that brings us back in line, basically.
Okay, perfect.
So we're going to talk.
So we've got a bit of a broad topic today, actually, to talk about, because I think there's some really interesting stuff that has come out from our survey, actually, that we run annually. So we did that at the end of 2024. And actually, one of the big things, which is so broad, and I think, given we've got Jordan with us today, it's a good one for us to all talk about, is all around change and transformation within recruitment and HR functions. Shall I start with a couple of stats?
Should we do the dingo? Because we've
well, let's yes, we should.
We've had a bit of a mishap, which is like
somebody forgot the dinger. So we've got a small substitute.
And it's like a really big engagement room.
But the really good thing is I get control of it. So yeah, if we do a gratuitous plug of our organisation, the Curve Group, for instance.
People guru. There we go.
Then we get the dinger because we know our HR community hate us selling to them. So there we go.
Exactly.
So
they'll be grateful because the dinger's with you, and that means that I can't ding it throughout the whole.
It's too hard to ding as well. When I'm solving it,
especially when it's placed. Actually,
we need a new dinger.
And if we do it later, I might have to take that away so no one has the dinger, and I'll keep hold of it. So let's see how this one goes.
Give us a start, Kelly. Come on, I can feel the start coming.
So when we did our survey and asked a lot of kind of organisations what they were doing, 50% declared that they've made changes last year to the HR departments. But the big one is that 94% of people that we surveyed said they're definitely making changes in 2025.
Wow.
And when we dug a bit deeper into that, the primary focus was around improving processes, huge amounts around cost efficiency, which we already know is underinvested anyway. Capitalisation on tech advancements was another one. And then just ensuring that legislative changes has been accommodated for. So there's loads and loads, as per usual. The reason we thought about this is to think about for 2025. So I just generally wanted to kind of talk about that today because I think people need some help. And actually perhaps we can put some flavour around that for everyone. So that's the starting point. Big topic.
A really big topic.
A big topic, and it's really interesting, isn't it? Because if you think about what's the narrative been for the last kind of 5 years with HR functions, every single CPO role or senior HR role in a leadership team we're trying to build a strategic HR function. I think what's really interesting for me, I think the advice that I would be giving to CPOs and heads of HR would be to make sure that you are in charge of your agenda. I think, unfortunately, as we know in HR, everybody seems to be an expert in HR, particularly people sat around the top table. And although they do have experience with people, it's really important, I think, to be running your own HR function and setting your own agenda. And what I see time and time again in lots of organisations is that there's a fad and there's a report from PwC and the CEO gets it, and then all of a sudden the HR function has to be X, Y, and Z. And I think quite rightly you said, Kelly, that HR hasn't been invested in for a long time. So how you digitize and become more efficient when you haven't really invested in process optimization, all of those types of things, investment in technology for AI to streamline processes and, even processes for your customers.
Yeah.
I think it's an interesting one. And I certainly, I think I would be disappointed if I was one of those CPOs that was sat around the top table and having my agenda coerced by the top table. Obviously, input's important, but I think it's important to be on the front foot and be really, really adamant about, yes, those are the latest trends. However, I know in my business, this is my agenda, strategy.
I think one of the key things that I'm certainly having a lot of conversations about, and have been probably for the last 8 months, is around their actual operating models as well. So there's a lot of opportunity. People considering kind of mixed modelling where they keep some of it in-house and focus on strategy and outsource some of it. Some people looking at things like overflow models. So when they reach capacity, they have places to put that in order to still deliver the same level of service, because they can't have an overflow of staff anymore. There's no cost in the business. So that's one of the things that I think has been really high on this kind of change and transformation piece as well.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And just another angle, slightly from a different point of view, is the whole national insurance increase. Yeah. I think has real cost pressure, and any CPO that is really trying to get additional costs into the business, I think is going to have a super difficult time, and is going to have a really clear business case as to why that is going to help an organisation. Because let's face it, anything there's so many cost pressures when people are having to make redundancies. Where does that cost come from? Where are these businesses meant to find that money? And they've actually either got to had a clear business case as to why it's going to either lead to a longer term success, retain the staff, et cetera, but without that clearly given business case. I think a lot of CPOs who, let's face it, post-COVID are now being asked out of the boardroom rather than into the boardroom is a real trend that is happening, and getting their credibility in amongst that is kind of really quite important.
And I just think it's really sad. I think we are entering a period of, particularly in the UK actually, if I compare kind of UK clients versus US clients, there's a marked difference in terms of what US companies are focusing on, their ambition, their confidence about leaning into different stuff. And I think we're all dialing back a little bit too much. And I think at the end of the day, going back to your point of restructuring HR functions, my guess is the majority of them will have been underinvested in for years anyway. We know that we are cutting budgets in terms of the strategic stuff like D&I, like culture. But I guess my question back to business and C-suites and CEOs is, where does this leave your business? The biggest cost and the biggest asset of a business is your people. 85% of the workforce are completely disengaged. So surely, if we're now on a cost point about taking even more cost out of HR, then I think we are massively losing the trick and losing the point if this is just a numbers game. Because if you don't have an agenda that engages your people and you're not developing your people and making them feel part of something, what's the output? What's the productivity? I know I did a podcast recently for Green Park, and the UK is number 33 out of 35 in terms of the poorest productivity out of European countries. Now, that's a shocking statistic, really, and we're still going in the opposite direction of taking more cost out. And more, well, it's not a more cost. I mean, if we are, and I understand that the economy is difficult at the moment. We've got numerous things impacting, but I think if we are in a world and a mindset of cost at the expense of everything, or profit at the expense of everything, then we know how that's impacting customer service. We know how it's impacting employee engagement. And I just wonder, what's the tipping point? Because I feel like we're becoming really unstrategic. I feel like we're doing short-term thinking in terms of how we're running businesses at the moment. And I just think it's going to leave us in a worse place, if I'm being honest.
There's a lot of change fatigue as well. Like, everyone talks about change and transformation without necessary objective or purpose as well at the moment. And I think actually the key thing when we're talking about change and transformation, there's a pressure to change, but actually if you start from the beginning and plan that properly, what is the objective of that change, and actually what you're trying to achieve? Because often what you're doing doesn't actually achieve what you're trying to achieve either. So I think there's a lot in there to think about.
Yeah, I agree, Kelly. I think that's a really good point.
What would you say around communication then for our CPOs, HR directors, our HR community, in terms of the messaging, because it feels like there's a real mismatch between we know 94% of people are going to change their HR department this year. How can they help the business in supporting them?
I mean, what I think, I've always been a fan of, I've massively invested in communications as a CPO, always. You know, the employee narrative, how people connect with what you're doing is really important. I think for me, and you know, I might have to stand and be counted on this, but I think the authenticity of what you're saying, I think a lot of organizations are under pressure to say one thing, but then they do another. And I think, so if this is a cost numbers game and you're looking to take costs out, then just be honest about it.
Yeah,
We're
exactly.
right sizing HR, we're right sizing our corporate functions, finance might be included in that. I think similarly, there needs to be much more focus for C-suites to be visible, to be accessible, to be connecting with the people, to be seen, to be listening. I think if you're going through such, I mean, it's just been miserable, hasn't it?
It really
I think,
has.
and let's you know, I've had a couple of clients in the new year where I've gone back and I've done a bit of, you know, revving back up after having the Christmas break, and the flatness. I know we all have, we all suffer from January blues, don't we?
Yeah.
But I think it's been even more amplified because it's been really miserable last year. Nobody's got any money. Everything just seems really difficult. When people start to act from
People
a position of
engaged as well.
and it's all kind of all coming
And I
together.
don't think the
as a
media
head.
help with it, because they're not sort of truly representing what's going on in businesses, really.
And there's so much going on across the world. But I think what's been really interesting is we've all really enjoyed Christmas. And when you look at what people have spent money on over Christmas, it was food.
Right,
Really nice food.
Interesting.
So I think people are just dialing right back. They are fed up with everything that's going on. So they're focusing on families. They're focusing on precious time together. What was interesting for me, a lot of my clients I've kind of caught up with, they've had a great Christmas. They've really thrown themselves into it. It's been a welcome break. They were fed up with how things were before Christmas, and then now we're going back into the environment where it's set to be even more difficult this year. So it's kind of, it almost makes it even more unbearable.
Yeah, I agree. And for HR directors, CPOs that are, I guess, challenged to make changes, what's your top tips for them? Because I think it's really important that we kind of give some advice around that. Because they're embarking on another year of pressure, aren't they?
It's a great question. Do you want me to go first?
Yeah, go for it.
For my mind, it's be clear about what changes you're going to make, communicate that really well, be clear that everybody understands the reasons why, and take people with you on the journey, but ensure in the first place that it is the priorities of the organisation, not the priorities of the HR department, is what I would say. You will engage, if you can get your C-suite to sort of engage with you, the understanding that you are the expert. This is a well thought through and meaningful piece of change for the whole organisation, and their responsibilities to back, support and be with you on it, and the business case behind it. It will serve all of those agendas and make the change, investing up front. And I know it's the old 7 habits, but sharpen the axe first in order to be able to then make the change effective, sustainable and long lasting that everybody appreciates, because change is not easy.
No, and Kenny, you made a really good point about people. It's just change and change and change, and then you look at how many change programs are effective and very little are. You kind of step back and wonder, well, why are you doing all these change programs if they're not being delivered properly? I mean, some organisations do it well, but the majority changes. It almost feels like change for change's sake. I think going back to your point, Nettie, I think it's really important as well. I think obviously organisations are going to be under pressure to reduce cost. And we've kind of been on that trajectory for quite a while. But I think also, I think from a CPO perspective, it's really important to remind the C-suite to just step out of transactional mode and remember the humanity element of it. So for me, what do you do if you take something away from a child? For example, if you take their toy, if a lot of stuff's going to charity, there's a bit of a negotiation. We're taking that, but we'll give you that. And I think I would be really, I would be really behind CPOs and making sure that they there's also holding the C-suite to account on if we're taking this cost out and the organisation knows no matter what we say in the narrative, if it's just a cost reduction program, then what are we going to put back in the pot? So what's the give and the get? And I think that, just make it human. It's not difficult, but at least be giving something back, or at least have some narrative around we are reducing costs in this way, but this year we're going to invest, even if it's one thing. What are you going to be doing for your people? Because we talked about the stats around engagement and productivity, and it's just...
That's actually a really good question to ask, isn't it? What are we going to give our people this year? And being able to answer that comprehensively is a really good question.
And it doesn't have to be lots. Not to boil the ocean, but, something.
Well, if you could. But, do you have a piece of advice?
I think for me it's just take it really sensibly, plan the change. So think about what your objective is, think about your operating model, and think outside the box. If you have a way to contribute towards the kind of impact on NI by reducing costs, make sure that doesn't ultimately impact what you're trying to achieve for your people strategy, because otherwise it doesn't actually work. So I think it's just about plan, and just don't stop out of execution and think about what you're doing before you start. And I think there's a lot.
Give yourself space to think.
The space, exactly.
And maybe appoint a business coach.
Someone that can troubleshoot. It is interesting, because I think also, we do fall into the trap of, I think most organisations are behind the curve. There's too much going on. There's too much stuff.
What you did.
Behind the curve.
Behind the curve. Curve group. There you go. I'm gonna give that a little. There you go.
It's too floppy.
I think a lot of, let's be honest, when there's a space and there's a trend, trends are helpful, but it doesn't necessarily represent everything that's going on in your business. And I think you can fall into the trap of, following a trend because it's what people are talking about. You've read the latest report from Thought Leadership, and then all of a sudden that's the next fad. And I think at the moment we need to move away from faddiness. If it's something that's going to deliver value, absolutely focus on it. If it's a necessity, focus on it. But I think we just keep filling the hopper up. And I think, going back to your change fatigue point, Kelly, just do a few things really well. And actually, if you look at the whole psychology of this, it's really interesting. Think about New Year. Let's take a Christmas example. New Year's resolutions.
Yes.
Well, why do they never work? Because psychologically, the biggest impact and the biggest change comes from micro changes. So it's just how you just make a few tweaks and dials. That's how you form a new neural pathway. And it was only until very recently that we thought that, your lived experiences as people throughout a certain period of your life, from your formative years to adulthood, then you then have a set view of the world. But what we've actually found out, which is really quite interesting, that your brain isn't fixed. You can learn new behaviours, and this is really powerful. This is really powerful for all businesses and leaders. The way that you form new neural pathways and new behaviours and new habits is by just making a few tweaks.
Agreed.
Little differences, and that's how you then break through the change barriers. So that's why wholesale change never works. People resist it, and this is why people are change fatigue. Just focus on making a few, kind of reasonable and what's the
well thought through.
and achievable changes.
Perfect. I think that's a bit of a wrap, really.
Well, thank you for joining us yet again for a bit of light relief. Hopefully you've had some good insight there into our views of the world and our community. We look forward to hearing from you on any topics that you would like us to discuss on the sofa. And thank you for joining us yet again.
Thank you.
Good to see you.
Bye.